everyone. We are back with a new episode of APIM Hotrod, and today we are here with Harold Campos. Harold, welcome in our show.
Thank you, Massimo. Thanks a lot for having me here.
Okay. So, Harold, I know you are an expert about LogicApps, Azure Integration Service, so migrating workload from on-premises to Azure Integration Service. And in this context, we were wondering to have a discussion about the role of API management when we have to migrate integration application that are on Bespoke and that are leveraging a lot of SOAP services. So that's the topic of the day.
That is fantastic. Yes, absolutely. We can definitely talk about how it's that API management and Azure Integration Services and LogicApps can help customers to deal with these legacy workloads based in SOAP APIs.
Yeah, and for example, in my experience, like I come from a background of a lot of bespoke implementation, and over there, a lot of time we're building SOAP services on top of this integration workflow. So in the era of SOA, that was a very common architectural design pattern. And today, when we have the need to migrate those SOAP services to AIS, to the cloud, most of the time we advise our customer to do this step, this migration in a sort of incremental step, right? And for example, using the Strangler fig patterns is also something that your customer is asking to you a lot.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of things. First of all, I've heard this once. Customers are building their own legacy. So you build it today, and tomorrow is legacy. Right? It's legacy ready. Now, but there are two what I call hyper legacy systems. You know, when you talk about bespoke server environments and the systems that they power, they used to have these. There was this concept around of SOA, right? The SOA, service-oriented architectures, and integrating with all kinds of legacy systems, true legacy systems that were built 50 years ago, for instance, right? So then during the SOA age, I think a lot of customers, they embraced the concept and they started building, web services, right? A lot of web services of all kinds. But SOAP became pervasive. SOAP and the WSDLs, and that became the lingua franca, so to speak, for all of these systems to talk. So that's why you had to introduce a tier, right? In that case, was bespoke server to deal with these SOAP services, right? And bespoke still does a fantastic job dealing with SOAP, right? You can expose orchestrations, you can call web services, you can do so many things with SOAP because it was designed around, right, to live in that world. That is not the case today, right? For more modern systems and applications, they rely on JSON formats, and that's the new format, and we are using JSON for everything, right? So then that leaves us with the situation where we have to coexist with these legacy workloads that are leveraging a lot of SOAP services and XML and WSDLs and AWS security and everything, right? And a world based in OAuth and JSON and tokenization, things like that, right? So you have to make them talk. And that's exactly where, customers are left with what do I do now? What's the best way to deal with these complex SOAP-based applications? In LogicApps, we have a connector, a custom connector that can leverage, you can create a custom connection experience and then leverage SOAP APIs. But the thing is, we abstract that on top of our shared infrastructure. That means that there is a limit on the things that you can do, as opposed if you were doing your own API management implementation. But I can go to details, but let me try to get back to the main topic, which is there are a lot of legacy workloads that require complex integration with these SOAP-based APIs, and API management is best positioned to do that work.
And for example, one of the things that I saw talking about legacy and talking about SOA, talking about APIs, web services, one of the things that is quite tricky when you do this kind of migration is if you have SOAP services that are using NetTCP, and that things is something that you will not be able to use with any other tool. You will not be able to use LogicApps and not able to use API management. And one of the incremental step or is changing this on Beanstalk to move from NetTCP to, let's say, classic HTTP, or having a mediation layer on top of it that does this for you. And then you can then start doing the migration via an API management gateway that allows to move to do a sort of protocol mediation, let's call it protocol mediation, from JSON to SOAP. This is one step, but it's also something that comes with time, planning, investments, and so on.
You know, when you mentioned, you brought a strangler pig pattern, right? As an idea, as a concept, is fantastic. I think a lot of the customers are adopting it, but the point that it's getting complex for them is right at the point of the coexistence. So because you still have to leave part of the legacy and the workloads running, right? So you start, strangling the pig, so to speak, right? But then there is a lot of coexistence that has to happen in place, right? And as you said it correctly, right? There is this transition stage where you have to think about networking and protocols, and ways how the applications were designed in this case, to make sure that transition is smooth. And it has to be gradual. That's the other thing that the strangler pig helps us with, right?
And especially the challenge is when you have big integration solution, can you have two integration solutions at the same time?
Exactly. No, exactly. You're spot on, right? And that is why we are trying to change the mindset of a lot of our Beanstalk customers. They think of Beanstalk server and licenses and boxes and Beanstalk and the SQL cluster. So they still talk in terms of VMs and SQL clusters and where is the stuff installed. And when you tell them about the whole idea of moving to Azure, LogicApps, Azure Integration Services, they have to change their mindset, because now they have this set in with Azure Integration Services. They have this set of services that they can create for which they can build composite solutions, and they can build like building blocks, literally, and they can grow as much as they can in the scenario where they want, right? For instance, if this is a Beanstalk workload, if they have Beanstalk workloads that that have a lot of orchestration, that have a lot of processes, so then it's ideal to have workflows in LogicApps that mimic those orchestrations, that have a sequence of triggers and steps. But if they are more oriented to these pub/sub scenarios, so then that's where we rely on Service Bus. But then on top of it, right, that's the reality where you have to deal with the new APIs, and that's Open API, that's JSON. So you need a tier, you need API management, to control that part of the gradual relation of these large systems that you mentioned, right? Because integration solutions, you have two integrations to deal with. Integration solutions, the best way to do it is to create a facade that will deal with what you are strangling with the strangling.
Exactly. And just like, because we are talking about SOAP and API management, one of the things that it was to mention for people that are into this, in the process of this migration, is that in API management, only the basic SOAP profiles are supported. So we are talking about basic HTTP things. So this is something that has to be to kept into consideration. So if you are using or if you have some WS star kind of protocol, these kind of things are out of the picture. You have to just first do a first step in to translate it to a basic HTTP profile, and then you can leverage in API management. That's is something that it was to mention. And another thing that is very interesting to discuss is normally with SOAP services we have a very large and big data contracts. So then if you are using API management to do this protocol translation from SOAP, so meaning XML towards JSON and vice versa, there are a lot of mappings to be done in API management, and that is also a challenge. And people are asking, is API management as a right point to do this protocol translation, yes or no? Is this a question that your customers are bringing also up to you?
They are asking about this question. So yes, we believe that for large WSDLs, it's a more complex WSDLs. It's better to use API management, because API management will give you more abilities to do customizations as opposed to use our LogicApps custom connector experience. Now, there is something that is worth mentioning. That is that in LogicApps, we recently introduced two new operations for parsing and composing XML. So while, yes, I acknowledge that a part of receiving or calling or sending or processing the WSDL, it can be a bit of a challenge because you have you can have large contracts. Once you get to the workflow in Azure LogicApps, you don't have to worry about those things because you have the data mapper, you have the maps experience, right? You have the XSLT maps, but you also have now the ability to parse very complex schemas, right, using an XSE. So then, when you talk about WSDL, when you talk about SOAP APIs, you typically have to talk about how to deal with the large and complex XMLs behind the scenes. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the next step, right? That's just the contract. So then everything that is flowing is still flowing to XML and XSE, and now we have connectors to deal with that through LogicApps.
Okay, that's cool. And it also worth to mention that I think at Ignite last week, or when it was some days ago, it also has been announced a sort of a policy toolkit for API management that it can help in defining your policy in C# and then translate this policy to the classic policy engine of API management. That could be good for testing this huge data contract, this huge XML transformation. It might also allow you to have a more clean policy if you decide to do this kind of protocol translation in API management, and to keep it clean, under control, and testable. It's also something, yeah.
So I think there is the other thing, the other part of the mindset that I just mentioned that we are trying to tackle with customers who are running still Vstock server, right? I was mentioning that they see Vstock server as a box, with its corresponding data repository. There is a lot of interaction between Vstock and the message box, and a lot of traffic across both and everything. Architectural things that came with Vstock server, right? But today, customers are left with some Vstock workloads. They see it as I want to like for like. I want to move to something. I want to migrate. When you get into the migration discussion, sometimes you can miss the opportunity of doing these large improvements to your systems that will give you a better return of investment. So I think what is great about these new additions to API management, and to LogicApps to deal with these more complex SOAP or legacy scenarios, is that if you put things in perspective, and doing the strangler fade, right, and doing this gradual approach, you can get to this is what I have today, what I can do, to the art of the possible. All of the great things that you can do with this new technology, right? And there is a lot of things that you can do integrating legacy workloads with OpenAI today. And API management has fantastic capabilities to deal with OpenAI today. I'm sure that you have covered that in probably some other session, or you're going to cover it in some session. But the art of the possible gets you to a point where you can integrate these hyper legacy systems that are raised in WSDL web services, services with OpenAI.
And then when you were talking about a hyper legacy system, in my mind, it remembered me Oh, but not long time ago. I think it was around 2016 or so. So 8 years ago, I was working with HIS. So
Right. That is
it's
so
something that I think you know very well. And I'm so HIS. There was some adapter in Bistalk that allows to connect to this host integration
Yes.
servers. So sorry if I don't use the right naming because
Yeah, no,
it's some years. But now when we migrate this hyper legacy system, at the end of the day, it will be LogicApps that will take care of this. So I will be able then to use a sort of a REST interface on top of it.
exactly. You're spot on. I was working with a bank in South Africa that had a system that it was a 48 years old system. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we were about the same. He was a bit older than me. So my point is that the legacy is not going away. So then you have to deal with the legacy, and by giving all of these great capabilities to API management and to LogicApps to deal with this legacy system, you're giving customers the ability to innovate when they integrate, right? They innovate through the reception, they innovate through the policies that they apply, they innovate to the moment where they can deal with the different formats, they innovate at the time when they can go and call OpenAI and do the RAG pattern, bringing VSOM files, as you said, the Bistalk has an adapter for host files. You bring a VSOM file, you access the VSOM file, you get the data, right? And then imagine in a world where you can ingest that legacy data, hyper legacy data, into OpenAI and then get augmentation, right? And then get chat completions. So those are the things that in the end, it's not about the specific feature that we talk about or about just dealing with the specific, complexity or nuisance of these SOAP-based workloads. It's about allowing customers to do things that today with other tools will not be possible. And that's exactly what we do with Azure API management, with Azure LogicApps, with Azure Integration Services, giving customers the possibilities to do innovation.
Yeah, exactly. So this show is focused on API management, but API management is a part of, as you mentioned, this Azure Integration Services family. And actually, the Azure Integration Service per se, they are an enabler for these hyper legacy systems. So they bring those systems, or it's a sort of a street into the modern world, right? So they they open the door to those innovative services that all of these hyperscalers are bringing to the market. So it's very, to me, it's also interesting to not look at those things as something that is far in the past, but how you can bring that technology also into the modern solution and make sure that they can leverage what we have right now, as you were saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, you're spot on, right? Hyperlegacy is there, right? So it's there. I had a meeting with an insurance customer 3 weeks ago, right? And we talk about Copilot. We talk about so many great things, right? But in the end, they say, "Well, Harold, I have a problem. I don't know if you can help me with. We have tons of Visa files and IBMI files, that we need to use for RAG ingestion. How do we do it?" So the data is there, right? You do migrate the data just because it's cool. I mean, you migrate the data because it makes sense, because it brings some return of investment, and that's exactly the mindset that we cover, with the patterns that we enable with API management and AIS.
Yeah, it's all about which kind of value we can deliver with a specific solution at the end of the day.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be cool. It can be cool, but first we want to know what is the value out of it. Because the customer is asking to us, right?
Exactly.
That's cool. Okay, so and so just to all of these adapters that LogicApps has at the end are all based on REST and HTTP and JSON. Sorry, right? So
JSON.
as an interface, and then they do a sort of mediation towards the different worlds, right?
Right, as you correctly said, right? So the connectors that we have in LogicApps, they behave in a very similar manner as we did have the adapters in Bistalk Server. But in Bistalk Server, the entity was the message, right? So you had messages for everything. it was great because it was a message-oriented architecture. Today, with LogicApps, it's more the main actor is the connection, right? So everything is connection-based. You open a connection to a system A or system B, and then the data that flows is, of course, is the data that can be exchanged indistinctly between JSON and XML now, right? So then you can do mappings, you can do all of the great things that you did with Vstock Server. But in the end, the main actor, so to speak, right, is the JSON file, right, the JSON data. So that's why, APIM and LogicApps, they are best poised to do this, these hyperlegacy integrations, because you can deal with the past and with the present and the future, right? So those are the things that you can do when you integrate APIM with LogicApps. You can receive with complexity, you can deal with these legacy workloads, these hyper legacy systems, and then you can do an innovation through the policies in APIM, right, or through the all of the steps and triggers that you have, actions and triggers that you have in a LogicApps workflow.
Okay. So we are wonderful. So we are at the end of our episode. So thank you so much, Harold, for joining this call today. We talk about SOAP, we talk about LogicApps and this hyper legacy system. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Harold.
Thank you, Massimo. It was great speaking with you.